Not too long ago, I had my tires rotated. When the technician noticed something odd on the back right tire of my vehicle, and he said, "Does your car feel like it's wobbling when you drive slow?" Ever been in that situation? The wobble? And I said, I feel it. The wobble's there. That's why I'm here. I want to have my tires rotated. And the technician said, because something is strange with this right tire, this right back tire. And I said, why? What's wrong with it? Well, it's not even. I said, well, rotate it, so it'd be great, right? It'll even out, hopefully. I felt the wobble on the way to the U.S., but at Cardston, I realized, you know what, this wobble may be dangerous, so I went to a tire shop in Cardston. Have you been to Cardston? That's a beautiful little town, all right? Just very close to the border. Anyway, at Cardston, the technician there told me, hey, maybe you're wobbling, but that's fine. All you need to do is have your tires rotated. And so that's why when I got back, I had my tires rotated. But this guy said, he pointed out something on the tire, and he said, it's severely uneven. This right tire, for some reason, it's almost like there's a portion of it that's shaved off. Shaved off. And I was like, I don't remember biting off of it, right? It's just shaved off. And he said, have you been driving on rumble strips? And I remembered something. On the way to Calgary one time to... like some people from Mosaic Church wanted to get a visa to the U.S., and so I offered to drive them to the consulate in Calgary. And here's the thing, when I drive, I tell people, this is the only rule, don't fall asleep. Don't fall asleep. Talk to me, don't fall asleep. Do you like people sleeping on you, right? When you're driving, you don't want that. You want people to talk to you, all right? So that's my only rule. Don't sleep. He's like, Pastor John, that's 6 hours away. No, don't sleep. You had the night, right? An entire night to sleep. Don't sleep on me. All right? And so everybody was just agreed to that. And then we were having fun. We were having, telling stories. And all of a sudden, somebody pointed out to me that somebody was actually sleeping. Sleeping aloud. Growling. Or maybe he's dreaming that he's a motorcycle, right? Anyway, I was like, I'm going to wake this person up. And so I drove on the rumble strip, right? I go, oh. And he was like, okay, he's awake now. And then he'd fall back asleep again. And I'd do the same thing. He'd wake up again. And you know what? Whenever the rumble strip don't work, I'm going to shout his name out. I would shout it at the top of my lungs, RC! RC! In my car, all right? We're enclosed. RC! If you don't know RC is our guest services ministry leadership team head. All right? So RC! And he would wake up and say, Pastor John, yeah. And he would sleep again. All right? And so I have been driving on rumble strips intentionally. And that man said, I don't think you drive on rumble strips. You shouldn't. You shouldn't. You don't do that. It's there for something else. There's a reason for rumble strips, but you don't drive on it. Now, what are rumble strips? What is a rumble strip? You all know that. You've all driven on it. It's that the slits and bumps on the road, on the side of the road going to the shoulder, or sometimes they're in the middle or the median, right? When you drive on it, you go brrr, right? Right? Can you say that with me? Brrr. That sounds good. That feels good. Brrr. Right? And you don't drive on it. There's a different purpose for that. Right? These slits and bumps on the road tell the driver that something dangerous is about to happen. You don't drive on it like I did. It'll ruin your tires. They're very expensive. But rumble strips are in place for one reason, to tell us that we're moving in the wrong direction. We're moving in the wrong direction. They are audible. That means you hear it, right? And you also feel it. That means they're tactile. So they're tactile and audible. You feel it and you hear it. To wake you up, to remind you, hey, you're getting closer to danger. When you're on it, it's as if your vehicle is shouting at you, like, RC! Right? You don't drive on it intentionally. There's a reason for the rumble strip. Rumble strips, here's the thing, rumble strips don't change you. They just tell you that something needs to be changed. Rumble strips don't fix you. It just tells you that there's something that needs to be fixed. Your focus. Say focus. Rumble strips. This Thanksgiving, I was thinking, what am I thankful for? Aside from the fact that God has saved me and I lead a church and all that, God led me to thank Him for rumble strips. Can you imagine, can you count the times, the number of times that rumble strips have saved your life? Come on, somebody, right? You're driving and you reach out to your phone to check your Facebook status, right? Or somebody else's status, and you go, brrr, you put it down, right? And you go, I'm never doing that again. And you're like, brrr, okay, no, never mind again. No, I won't do that again. Number of times rumble strips have saved you. We need, here's the gist, and here's the reason why we're doing this sermon series called Rumble Strips. We need rumble strips on the road. We need rumble strips in our life. We need rumble strips in our life. Why do we need rumble strips? We need them because, number one, drifting can happen to anyone, anytime. It can happen to anyone, anytime, or anytime to anyone. That's why we need rumble strips on the road. And that's why we need rumble strips in our life. We can drift. Tell your neighbor, hey, we can drift. And when you're driving, like I said, you check your phone, you feel the burr, right? Brrr, and you correct your position right away. You don't want to end up in the ditch, right? If you ignore that, you go straight into the ditch. For some reason, here's the thing. We don't learn our lesson, right? We've experienced that already, and we'll try still to reach out to our phone until we hear that brrr, we won't go back. We need rumble strips in our life because drifting happen and can happen anytime to anyone. We can, and we all have the tendency to drift. Turn to your neighbor and say, hey, you will drift. We all drift. We all have the tendency to drift in life, not just on the road. Drifting happens. When do they happen? Number one, when you're not paying attention, right? You shift your attention on something else and then you hear the brrr. When you're sleepy, right? Brrr. It wakes you up and you correct your direction, your position, and it also happens, we tend to drift when we take our hands off the wheel. And we talked about that a little bit last week. You don't need to do anything to drift. Just let go of the steering wheel and you will drift. You will drift. If we're not careful, you can even end up in a devastating situation. Drifting happens to all of us. And drifting can happen in all areas of life, not just in driving. All areas of life. You can drift in your soul. You can drift away from your faith. You can drift away from your church. You can drift away from your health. You can drift away from wisely using your finances. You can drift away from your friends. You can drift away from your marriage. You can drift away from your ambition, your dreams, your passions, your job. We all have the tendency to drift. Last Thursday, I was at a local coffee shop, and I saw this man, and he was one of the pastors here in town. He's an amazing man, originally from Africa, and he was at that coffee shop for a date night. A date night. And he came up to me, and after the pleasantries exchange, he said, we're here on a date night, so I wouldn't take too much of your time, Pastor John. And I was like, no, I wouldn't take too much of your time. Go. Leave me. All right? I'm single. Go. All right? And so I was like, wow, this is an amazing thing. Because a couple, they have been married for several years now, but they still go out on dates. If you're married, do you still go on dates? You should. And that's the thing. When people get married, here's the first thing that goes away or that's neglected is the date night. Right? When you're going out and you're not married yet, you're still getting steady, you always want to spend time with that person, right? You're broke, you have nothing to pay food with, and you still go out. Yeah, hey, let's just walk in the park. You don't have money, right? Yeah. So, hey, let's just walk in the park. Let's just have pizza. Let's have wings, whatever, right? But once they're married, because they live together, that's the first thing that goes. Date night, because every day is date night, right? Right? That's the first thing that goes. And one of the things that I appreciate about that relationship was that, hey, they intentionally go out on dates still. Why? Because there's a tendency for everybody to drift away from the people they love. Even in your marriage. Do you agree with me? Even in your marriage, you can drift. You got to be intentional in every area of your life. Otherwise, you drift apart. Why do you drift? Because you don't pay attention. You don't pay attention. And I'm telling you, I've counseled also so many couples who grew apart because they have drifted away from each other because of their work schedule, right? And so many other things and emotional bonds with, or developing emotional bonds with other people that cause them to drift from the one they should be bonding with. I've also counseled so many people who have drifted from their faith and the church. And it starts with, it's hard for them because of their work schedule. There's this great desire to have more money because there are so many financial obligations. And then before you know it, your work and your desire to have more has allowed you or caused you to drift away from Jesus. And when God allows a loud rumble in your life, that's when you come back. For some people, they come back after experiencing a collision already in the form of a trial. And that's why we need rumble strips. But here's the thing. We all drift. Drifting can happen in every area of our life. And drifting never ever happens in the right direction. We never ever drift in the right direction. You agree with me? Try it this week. Or try it after church. When you're driving, just let go of the wheel. You'll see and you'll understand what I'm saying. We never ever drift in the right direction. You don't sleep on the steering wheel and wake up in your garage. Oh, look at this, 4 hours of driving. I'm home. Not happening, y'all. No, not happening. Not happening. Drifting can happen, and we never ever drift in the right direction. And so the thing is, you don't take your hands off, like I said, of the wheel and end up in your garage. You can't float in life and achieve your goals. Amen, teenagers, right? You can't live aimlessly and hit your targets unless everything is your target, right? Drifting happens. There's a verse in the Bible that warns us about drifting. Hebrews chapter 2, verse 1. It says this. So we must, and I love that, so we must, there's an emphasis there, very carefully, listen very carefully to the truth. What do you listen to? The truth we have heard, or we may drift away from it. The book of Hebrews was written to a group of Jewish Christians, Hebrew Christians, who lived in the first century when Christianity was illegal. Many of these Christians, these Christ followers, faced a lot of trials and a lot of threats of persecution. A lot of them even lost their jobs because of their faith. They lost their families because of their faith. And for many of them, they have drifted away from their faith because they didn't want to lose any of those things. Like, who wants to lose your family? Who wants to lose your job because of your faith? And so they drifted away. But the writer of these letters in Scripture, they remind us of how important it is to really stay in the truth. Turn to your neighbor and say, stay in the truth. And the Bible tells us, the verse says, listen very carefully to the truth. Plant it in your heart so that you won't drift away from it. That's why verse 2, Hebrews chapter 2, verse 2 says, do not ignore or neglect the great salvation that you have. Don't neglect. Don't drift away. Because the moment you neglect, you drift away, and before you know it, you're so far away from your church, from your husband, from your wife, you are so far away because you've neglected it. Again, what do you do in order to neglect somebody? Nothing. What do you do to neglect your faith? Nothing. Nothing. You don't neglect your church and expect to grow. You don't neglect your marriage and expect to be happy in it. You can't neglect your finances and expect to be rich. You can't neglect school and expect to get high marks. You can't neglect your relationship with God and expect an abundant life. That's why we need rumble strips, so we can get back on the right direction before it's too late. Before it's too late. Once you hear that, you go back to the right direction. You steer your life back to the right direction. And in the next 3 weeks, or 2 more weeks, we will be talking about these rumble strips that God has placed around us. Next week, Pastor Ta will talk about the internal rumble strips in our life. All of us have an internal rumble strip called the conscience, a conscience. And he will talk more about that. And the following week, when I get back from New York City, I'll be preaching on the external rumble strips in our life. And so we'll focus now on the need for rumble strip. Turn to your neighbor and say, hey, you need a rumble strip. We all do, right? A rumble, a simple rumble, can save your marriage. A simple rumble can save your finances. Do you know that? Maybe you've been neglecting your finances for a long time and you're getting closer to insolvency or bankruptcy, or you're losing a lot. Hey, maybe a little rumble from a friend and say, hey, you're spending too much. That's a lot of chicken wings. Right? Hey, stop. Invest in the future. Yeah, what future? The horizontal growth. Anyway, hey, neglect is when you don't do anything. You don't do anything to drift. Do you agree? But driving takes a lot of effort. Driving takes a lot of effort. Ever wonder why we say, pay attention? Why do we say pay attention? Because progress is expensive. Progress is expensive. If you want to move on with your life, you're going to have to pay attention. Progress requires that we pay attention. You can't drift to progress. That's why I'm a big believer in God. Here's the thing. When we leave things on its own, it'll, you know, the law called the second law of thermodynamics. You leave a garden on its own and it will not maintain itself. It'll drift towards what? Into becoming a jungle. It leads that way. And so I'm a firm believer in God because of that inner rumble strip inside of us. When we're about to do something stupid, you feel it in your heart. That hunch, don't do it, don't do it. There's something inside of you that says that, right? Don't say it, John Last. Don't say it, Jonathan Last. Stop. Don't do it, right? That is God's way of reminding us, hey, we're about to head onto a collision or a devastation. You don't do anything to drift, but driving takes a lot of effort. Progress is expensive. And if you want for your garden to be maintained, you have to, what? Spend time in it. Destination requires intention. Turn to your neighbor and say that. Destination requires intention. Those of you women who were pursued by your partners in life, or maybe you're a teenager, or maybe you're in your marrying age and you want to pursue somebody, hey, you pursue intentionally. If you want that to be your destination, you have to what? Pay attention. You have to be intentional. I talk about intention a lot because that's what God is to us. He's very intentional in our life and the way He wants to connect with us. Ephesians chapter 5 verses 14 to 17 tells us this. This is why we say, wake up, you who are sleeping. Can you turn to your neighbor and say that? Hey, if that person beside you sleeping, hey, wake up. Say, wake up. All right? Wake up. This is the Apostle Paul saying, hey, wake up, you who are sleeping. What is he saying? We can't sleep on the steering wheel, like I said, and get to our destination. That's just impossible. Getting to your destination is costly. Success requires hard work. Success in your marriage requires effort. Your spiritual growth could mean giving up something so precious to you that keeps you from experiencing real growth. We need to stay awake and be aware. Right? Stay awake and be aware. We are being reminded here, hey, it takes effort to drive. If you want to get to your destination, stay awake. That's the title of this sermon. Stay awake. So again, turn to your neighbor and say, stay awake. Give him a tap too, all right? Stay awake. You got to stay awake. In fact, the Apostle Paul continues by giving us an advice, and he says in verse 15, so be very careful. This is the second time we've read the word careful, right? Hebrews chapter 2, verse 1, very carefully. Now here, very carefully, right? How you live. Be very careful how you live. Live wisely, not like fools. Not like fools. Verse 16, I mean that you should use every opportunity you have for doing good because these times are evil. What is Paul saying here? If we don't pay attention, you could lose opportunities, right? You could neglect important areas of your life. If you don't pay attention, you might lose them. When he said these are evil times, or these times are evil, he meant the world or the enemy have no intentions for you to win or to succeed, but he has intentions for you to experience defeat. And so if you're not careful, you might drift towards his plan for your life. Defeat, devastation. And verse 17 says this, so don't be foolish. Turn to your neighbor and say, don't be foolish. Don't be foolish with your lives, but learn what the Lord wants you to do. Learn what the Lord wants you to do. Say, learn. There are people here who, if they don't pay attention or wake up right now, could end up with either a broken bone or a broken heart. In 10 years, if some people don't pay attention to what's going on in their life, they can either be in a cage or in a casket. See, that crew that tries to steal you away, that you hang out with, tries to steal you away from God. That activity that you engage in could be stealing you away from your destiny. That choice that you make could lead somewhere else. That's why we need rumble strips. And I pray that in this series we would be sensitive to the rumble strips of God. The ones that He has placed in our life. And if we don't attention, we could drift away, and it might be too late for us to correct what might be ahead. See, drifting is involuntary. It's subtle, it's mindless. But driving requires constant fine-tuning and intentionality. So the question is, when you're driving, of course, am I driving towards a ditch? Or am I driving towards my destination? Am I heading towards oncoming traffic? Is my life headed for destruction? Where's your life headed? That's the question we need to ask throughout the series. Where is your life headed? And like we've already said, we all need rumble strips so that we may stay on track and determine where our life is headed. And so here in this series, we want to ask the Holy Spirit of God to apply the rumble strips in our life. In our life. Where they're needed. And like I said, drifting can happen in any area of our life. And we need to ask God, God, where do I need some rumbling? I may be making a choice that is not heading or not causing me to head to the right direction. Maybe I need some rumbling there. God, send some people. Send your Spirit. Lord, I need some rumbling. What is it that I need some rumbling in? Maybe it's in the area of your spending. Maybe it's in the area of your health. Maybe it's in the area of your relationship. I was talking to a group of teenagers not too long ago, and I said, hey, be very, very careful when you engage in conversations. Because here's what I believe, and psychologists also agree with this. There are two ways people can be soul tied. Have you heard of the word soul tie before? Soul ties. It is possible for a soul and a soul to be tied together. They become your soulmates. The first way for a person to be soul tied with somebody is through physical intimacy, aka sex. But another way for you to be soul tied with somebody is conversation. Really deep, intimate, emotional conversations. Right? And I gave an example to the group of teenagers that I was talking to. I said, do you ever feel this way? Like you feel jealous when that person that you always text or you always talk to is talking to somebody else, and you feel like, that hurts. Why is she talking to somebody else, right? You've been there. And I said, because you've been soul tied. Maybe we need some rumbling in that area. Maybe we need some rumbling in like I said, in our church life. Maybe we're drifting away. What is it that you need some rumbling in? Because your relationship with God, your church life, your habits, your connections, your marriage, your purity, where is it headed? We need some rumbling. Tell your neighbor, hey, we need some rumbling. See, the last point that I have here is you cannot correct what you don't detect. You cannot correct what you don't detect. If you don't know or don't listen, or you have become so dulled out to what's coming or the brrr in your life, you'll crash right on. You might think, oh, it's a rumble strip. Oh, let's drive on it. And before you know it, your tire's all shaved off. Because you drove on a rumble strip. You're not correcting your direction because you've chosen not to detect the warnings. So what we want to learn here is how we can all live an abundant life. Do you believe that God wants you to live an abundant life? An overflowing life, a meaningful life that Jesus wants you to experience? We want to ask Him to give us wisdom. We want to ask Him to apply rumble strips in our life where it's needed. We want to ask Him to help us identify areas that we might be neglecting. It's up to you now to think, what am I neglecting in my life? What do I need some rumbling? God, rumble me. Rumble my life. Remind me of the things that I might be missing out on or might be ignoring. Some of us perhaps are not feeling the rumble. You could be drifting from your destiny into a potential dangerous relationship with somebody. Maybe you're drifting into oncoming traffic by compromising your identity, giving yourself away to something that you know isn't God honoring. Maybe the group of friends that you have, you're giving power to influence you. That activity that you think is harmless, that choice that you're making, if you don't feel the rumble, might keep you from fully receiving and enjoying that life that God intended for you. So on this series, I want us to learn and to lean into God. Turn to your neighbor and say, hey, lean into God. And ask Him to give you an open heart. In the next 3 weeks, like I said, or 2 more weeks, be willing to receive and obey what God says to you and what God says you need for you to hear, and allow Him to apply the rumble strips where they're needed in your life. The Bible tells us that there are 2 roads. There are 2 roads. One that leads to life and one that leads to destruction. And the very reason you are hearing this perhaps is because God is now rumbling you. He's telling you, hey, you're on the wrong direction. He's calling out to you and telling you, hey, step onto the road that leads to life. Do not ignore the rumble right now. Listen to what Jesus said in Matthew chapter 7, and this is where we close. And the worship team will come and lead us in the closing song. Jesus said this, you can enter God's kingdom only through the narrow gate. Who's that gate? That's Jesus himself. The highway to hell is broad. Do you know that song? Highway to... Yeah. We'll sing that here one of these days. But no, I'm not. We'll see. The highway to hell is broad, and its gate is wide for the many who choose that way. The many who choose that way. But the gateway to life is very narrow, and the road is difficult. You need to pay attention. You need to focus. You have to have intention. You don't drift onto this narrow road. It's very difficult, and only a few ever choose it. How is it difficult? How is it difficult? God, I thought you want us to have an abundant life. Why would you give us a difficult road? Come back next week and the following week, all right? But Jesus is saying here, hey, there are two roads. Maybe God is telling you right now, hey, you're on the wrong road. Move. I'm calling to you right now. I'm calling to you right now, my child. Come back. Come to the right path right here. God is telling you, hey, I have better plans for you. It's time for you to step onto the road that's more exciting. It might be difficult, but it's exciting. It's a life that will lead to everlasting life. Hey, it's exhilarating. It's going to be challenging, but it's also going to be satisfying. And you will experience an overflow of my goodness in your life. It's very interesting how Jesus said the highway to hell is broad and its gate is wide, and many people choose that way. It's fun, yeah, it could be exhilarating, but it's all temporary. But here's the thing, just because many people choose it doesn't make it right. Why is it difficult? Let me give you a little bit of a hint here. It is difficult to choose that narrow path because like I said, there are things perhaps in your life that you enjoy that isn't good for you, that you need to give up. That's difficult, right? It is. It is difficult to give up some of the things that might cause you, that you enjoy, but it's stealing you away from God. What else can you identify in your life? We can't give you an exhaustive list of the things that you might be enjoying, that you want to keep in your life. But God says, no, take that away. It's not good for you. As we close, you have to make this decision now, a choice between life or destruction, like Jesus said. And so now we ask ourselves this. What are you doing and where are you going? Who are your guides and what will you change? Where are you going? Where is your life headed towards? Are you ignoring the rumble strips around you and in your life? And you're choosing destruction? A lot of people don't know that they're actually headed towards destruction. Like I said, in any area of your life, could be spiritual, it could be financial, could be your relationships, I don't know. But maybe you're headed there. Where are you going? The next question, who are your guides? See, a lot of us empower people in our lives to be influencers. Do you believe that? People can influence you. The things that you watch can influence you. And here's the thing, who do you choose to influence you? Who do you choose to guide you? Who are you allowing to guide you? That's another thing that we can talk about, that we will talk about in the next 2 weeks. Who are you inviting into your life to surround you, to speak into you, to rumble you when it's needed? Who are they? And of course, number 3, now that you've heard the rumble, what do you need to change?
Thank you for joining us at Mosaic Church. If you have been blessed by today's message, or if you have made the decision to receive Jesus as your Lord and Savior, please let us know about it. Email us at mosaiclord@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you. If you wish to know more about our church, you may visit us online at www.mosaiclloyd.com. God bless you. See you again next week.